A very warm welcome to all of you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you so much, all of you and all the participants who are with us today. I am Subhadra and I represent the Fair Labor Association. And I'm based in Bangalore and I take care of the programs in South Asia and Southeast Asia. It's really a great pleasure to have you all. So can we have the second slide, please? So I'm going to quickly, before setting the context of the webinar, I'm going to quickly share a few lines about Fair Labor Association. And as I know most of you know about FLA, so ours is a multi-stakeholder non-profit organization. And we are collaboratively working with various stakeholders, businesses, universities, and of course, civil society organization. Our continuous and combined effort is to protect workers' rights and improve working conditions globally and worldwide. We were founded in 1999, and our global presence is across 20 countries. Our head office is in Washington, D.C., and also we have an office in Geneva. We work basically with a dual focus on accountability and capacity building, and also safeguard mechanisms, which are a very, very strong platform to protect workers' rights. The next slide, please. So we have a board of, our board of directors represent all the, stakeholders, basically from the business side, from the company side, from the CSO side, the union side, and also from the universities. Yeah, so I'm going to quickly go to the fourth slide. Amandine, is it possible to show the fourth slide, which is basically going to show the companies and the brands that has affiliation. We are with, so we have, yeah, thank you. So we, as you can see, that transparency and accountability is something which is a very, very strong part of our work with the global supply chains across the countries that we are working. We are currently with 50 companies who are affiliated to FLA and 13 participating suppliers. These are some of our companies that you can see, and we are also present in 20 countries. Yeah, the next slide. And our main focus is, of course, to engage with CSOs, with unions, with research organizations, labor rights organizations. And the key to understanding is, of course, ultimately to work towards improving conditions of workers. So the next slide is going to show you quickly the presence of FLA across the globe. And we are present in 20 countries where we have our participating companies and suppliers. We, yeah, the next slide, Amanda. Right. Yeah, so that's basically the areas and the countries and the regions where we are present. Before I, that's all about in brief about FLA. Of course, you're most welcome to go to our website and learn and know more about our programs and our approaches and our strategies. Today's webinar, I would like to, basically bring everyone's attention that we all know right now we are almost kind of, complete a year that we all have been facing with COVID-19 and in all our work areas and working with, workers in different sectors. And COVID-19, as we know that, the pandemic has pushed the world into a very, very unprecedented crisis, and it has, hit all the sectors, but among them, the worst hit had been in the global supply chain had been the home-based worker and workers in the informal sector. As we know that we have, 13, we are aware that there are almost 13 million workers alone in India who are in the industry and in the factory setup. But sometimes the facts that we don't know are, we have much more, millions of workers who are actually in the informal sector and they're not visible, they're the invisible workers. So we have like estimated, an approximate estimated in South Asia, we have more than 50 million home-based workers. And today we have Hidden Home Workers Initiative. My colleagues are here from various organizations, and the Hidden Home Workers Initiative started actually with a primary objective to address the inadequate visibility of and the subcontracting issues, and to address these issues of home-based workers in the apparel sector and in other sectors. So looking at it, I think one of the most, another important objective of, this initiative was collaborating with multi-stakeholders initiative, and also with brands and suppliers and governments, non-government. So I think that is where FLA's, role was very prominent, where, FLA engaged with the home workers, hidden home workers project and the initiative. And this is one platform where I think this is a good network and a very strong platform where we can see that, which can provide, tools and guidance and simple yet effective policies to assess, the home workers situation, to be aware of the home workers situation, which is across in the garment sector in South Asia, and also maybe, develop action plans, and which will help us to drive transparency and improve the overall working conditions in the apparel sector and in the footwear sector. And in the long run, and I know that HNSA, HomeNet South Asia colleagues are with us today, is working on policies at a national level in each country in South Asia, also to, have a national level home workers policy, which is actually in line with ILO 177, Convention 177. So these are very, very, I think, very significant areas which definitely needs focus. And overall, acknowledging and assessing the home-based garment workers, and why there is a need, and what is the situation with home workers. Today we are going to basically learn more about, we have eminent speakers today. I'm not going to take much more time, and I also want to quickly mention that FL has also been engaged with home-based workers project in Agra in the leather sector with MV Foundation. We have MV Foundation also today as one of our panelists. So we will wait to hear from all of them. I also welcome personally Laila ji from HomeNet South Asia Pakistan, and Mary, Shakuntala ji, Sonakshi, and of course Rohan and Rakesh from Traidcraft, with whom I've been working closely last couple of weeks. Thank you, everybody. So now I'm going to definitely look forward and give the floor to Rohan to take this webinar forward. I also have a request that for all your questions, please use the Q&A box, and please, we really want to encourage participation, and please, address your questions in the Q&A box. And if you have any technical error in the Q&A box, you can also write on the chat box. Thank you very much. Lovely to have you all. And you all have given time for this valuable issue. Thank you very much. Over to Rohan.
Thank you very much, Subhadra, and welcome to everyone. I know people are joining from different countries, different continents, and it's really good to be with you all today. I would just add that for those of you who would prefer Hindi translation, there is periodic Hindi translation available in the chat box for you. So a bit about, from Traidcraft, a bit about Traidcraft and a bit about the Hidden Home Workers program. So we, as Traidcraft, work in South Asia and in East Africa, and with a base in the UK. And we join you here this evening really in the context of our program to work to improve working conditions and transparency and traceability in home worker value chains. We have a specific focus really on apparel and footwear, and we have a number of different partners in our initiative, including Traidcraft and Homenet South Asia, Home Workers Worldwide, and ground level partners in Nepal, Class and Sabah, SAVE in Tirupur, Homenet Pakistan, and also SEWA in Delhi. And the program is designed really to work collaboratively as much as possible with brands and MSIs in both Europe and in South Asia, in order to improve conditions for home workers. We are trying to really focus on supporting greater recognition, greater respect, and greater representation for home workers in these global value chains. and as mentioned, particularly in the context of apparel and footwear and related sectors. Amandine, if you could just share the next slide. We're working at different levels. So we're working with home worker communities. We're working with grassroots organizations towards improved rights and access to entitlements. Some of the critical entitlements obviously have been particularly important since the pandemic, and we've been part of that service provision for home workers in different areas. We're also trying to strengthen policy for home workers. So as Subhadra had mentioned, in line with the ILO Convention number 177, and trying to really facilitate that recognition that is so important that home workers receive at the policy level. We're also interested to work with consumers and consumer-facing platforms, and to really begin to integrate some more information about home workers in these platforms. And for brands, we're trying to, as much as possible, channel some of the best practices that have already been established, not necessarily rewriting the wheel, but to actually try to collate some of the best examples of policies and practices, and then to accelerate that transition across different sectors, so that actually in line very much with the UNGPs and the OECD due diligence guidelines, for example, for responsible supply chains in garment and footwear, and various national standards that practice can improve. And then the principle of do no harm can be applied to home workers as well, and really that their rights are put first. And in so doing, in fact, some of the most salient supply chain risks can then be better addressed. So without further ado, that just gives a bit of a snapshot in terms of our program. What we'd like to do now is to give a bit of a deeper treatment of some of the challenges that home workers have been facing since the pandemic. And Amandine, thank you. You can close the presentation. And for that, our Hidden Home Workers Program partner, Homenet South Asia, is with us, and Janavi sends her apologies. Actually, there was an urgent medical issue, but we're very happy to welcome Sonakshi today, who is currently program coordinator at Homenet South Asia, which is South Asia's first and only network of home-based worker organizations spread across the SAARC countries. Sonakshi focuses on global supply chains, and particularly on understanding some of the specific challenges that women home-based workers face while working in garment supply chains, and indeed how grassroots organizations led by home-based workers themselves are actually successfully developing their own good practices as solutions to some of these challenges. And she's been particularly looking recently at the impact of COVID-19 on women home-based workers, and it's about that she'll now share some important findings with us. Over to you, Sonakshi.
Thank you so much, Rohan, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm going to quickly share my screen. Is this visible?
Yes, Sonakshi.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mary. Good evening, everyone. Rohan's already spoken about Homenet South Asia. So I'm here to give some context on what kind of impact we have been able to see of the COVID-19 pandemic, specifically on women home-based workers in South Asian countries. And I'm essentially going to be speaking on the basis of a detailed study that we recently concluded, with the help, of course, of our member organizations. And I'm very happy to have two of them here, actually, Homenet Pakistan and SAVE, who are both participants in this study. To give you a little bit of context of, sorry, just checking time. Context of this study, we conducted it in 7 of the 8 SAARC countries. So all the countries, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, minus Afghanistan. 11 locations in total. about 400 women home-based workers as respondents, and along with that, about 13 key informants who were experienced people who have been working in the respective member organizations, who were able to give us a more overarching view. Period of study. So we looked at our survey in terms of 3 periods, which of course we were able to arrive at in consultation with the members themselves. One was the pre-crisis period, which we considered to be February 2020. The peak lockdown period, which for most South Asian countries was between April and May 2020. And then the post-lockdown, or the period where the recovery kind of started for some of the workers, which is July-August 2020. We used the same questionnaire design that was prepared by our sister organization WeGo, and data collection was led by our member organizations in the respective countries. Main findings, looking at work and income first. The first one, of course, is that cancelled or lack of work orders led to a total wipeout of the season for home-based workers. With respect to this, I think I want to take a minute to talk about the garment sector specifically. So one thing is that despite us not selecting the sample purposely, 77% of our total respondents ended up belonging to the garment and textile sector. So one, that was an indication again of how heavily home-based workers are involved in global and domestic supply chains for garment. And out of these 77% respondents who were in the garment and textile sector, about 68% were subcontracted piece rate workers, which means that they are working on garments and textiles for buyers or suppliers or global brands or domestic brands. The second thing is earnings wise. So earnings for these particular respondents in the garment sector was reduced to 0 in 3 of the cities that were surveyed, between 1 to 5% in another 3 cities, and between 6 to 12% in another 4 cities. So the impact was huge. Speaking of recovery, it's happening, but it's slow. So now August onward, income levels have gone up to a maximum of about 30 to 40% of their pre-crisis levels. So in some places, and owing to no recognition either by the respective governments or by the factories or the brands that they're producing the products for. Of course, these home workers were left pretty much without any safety net or any kind of social security, because schemes and allowances and things were announced to a certain extent for workers, but these home workers did not end up getting covered in any of them due to lack of formal recognition. The third thing is that these garment workers, home workers in the garment sector, kind of felt they had a sense of what's coming before Corona reached South Asia, actually, because orders had started to be cancelled in Jan, Feb itself. Shipments were getting suspended. So they started to feel the impact of the pandemic before it actually reached us in medical terms. So that's the other thing to keep in mind. Moving on. So now I'm coming back to the total respondent findings. So 63% respondents were in the food sector, 71% in garment and handicraft. These reported 0 work. So work was lost. 77% of the respondents were forced to borrow or draw down on savings or sell or pawn their assets to cope with the crisis. Of course, limited or no accessibility to formal banking systems also meant that they had to go to informal money lenders or resort to informal lending mechanisms, which is often at high interest and very risky. Quickly looking at the impact on income, actually, it's similar to what I spoke of in the garment sector, but just looking specifically at these 3 cities where the weekly earning actually went down to absolutely 0 in the peak lockdown period. And these happen to actually all 3 be Indian cities. And then on the other hand, there is Thimphu in Bhutan, where the impact was the least. And Bhutan actually stood out as a unique case compared to the rest of South Asia for multiple reasons. The first one, of course, that they seem to have an already existing welfare and social security mechanism in place. And that covered a lot of workers in the informal sector, which included home workers as well. which meant that they were already in a better position to deal with a shock like this. And secondly, they were very, very quick to take up prevention and control mechanisms with respect to the pandemic. So they immediately sealed borders with their surrounding countries. They had their medical team activated. They created quarantine facilities for the few cases that came in, and travel and everything was stopped. So they were able to contain the cases. So actually the reduction in income that we've seen in Bhutan was more due to the reduction in tourism and tourism related economy, as opposed to the lockdown leading to a direct reduction in the domestic jobs. Speaking a little bit more about this zero work. So one thing worth pointing out, and I'm going to just explain this graph a little bit. The three lines are significant of the three periods that we looked at. So the blue line is pre-crisis, the red line is of peak lockdown, and the green one is of the recovery period, August onward. On the left, the percentages 43, 22, and 0, these refer to the percentage of respondents without work who belong to, who were members of some kind of producer company or worker-led collective, which means that these are organizations of home-based workers that are directly accessing work. So they've cut through the supply chain and they have formed networks with brands or buyers directly, and they're negotiating and they access work. As opposed to the figures on the right, which are the percentages of which is the percentage of respondents who were not members of any such producer company or collective. And so we saw a huge difference in access to work in these two categories, which really did reinforce something that we have seen through our other surveys as well, which is that due to this membership, due to organizing as a collective or a producer company or as a social enterprise that's run by workers, there is that experience that they had, their networks that they had, and also an intent to take care of the members, to provide some kind of work to the members. And so they were able to realign their supply chains, contact hospitals to make PPE for them, start mask making work. And so they took a lot of initiative to generate some kind of livelihood. Other findings not related to work and income. One thing is of unpaid domestic work and childcare, which went up heavily for women home-based workers. 65% of them reported increase in cleaning work, and 50% reported more time spent in childcare. The children were at home, schools were all shut. 70%, this is related to relief. They reported receiving no cash or food under government relief, which kind of is a very clear marker of what happened at the implementation level. But on the other hand, non-government organizations, religious institutions, and citizen initiatives turned out to be the winners when it came to providing relief. So 45% of them reported getting food relief from these type of organizations. And of course, our home workers organizations such as trade unions and their collectives were also part of this. These are just some quotes from home workers as part of the survey that we conducted to give you a sense of what the impact was. We have spent days eating just chutney and roti during the lockdown, as there was no money to buy anything else. Another one is that it's hard not knowing when this situation will end, and lack of income and work adds to mentally being more anxious too. So definitely an impact on mental health. And in fact, some of the member organizations did take cognizance of this, and they were providing either formal or informal psychosocial counseling to a lot of these members over the phone, over Zoom, when it became possible in small in-person gatherings. And in terms of the support, after the lockdown, my union has linked me with work of stitching masks and dresses. This has enabled me to earn a livelihood. And another home worker saying that our women's society helped us with loans. So definitely being part of some kind of organization has helped. This is just my last slide, which talks about some recommendations that we have based on what we've found out as a result of this study. The first one is that a well-planned quick response strategy is needed to cover food and other essential needs during the crisis. And this needs to be easily accessible. So in a lot of places, like for example, Maldives specifically, or even Mumbai at first, they reported that there was a scheme for home workers or for the poor to get food, to get relief, but the documentation process was so complicated that a lot of them were not able to access that relief at all. The second one is around reducing pre-existing vulnerabilities. So what we saw is that a lot of the issue that occurred as a result of the pandemic is because a lot of systems were already broken. So there are two things here. One is recognition of home workers by brands. And this is big, and we see and we anticipate a huge positive impact of this, of course, because once they are recognized as employees or as workers working for a particular buyer or for a particular brand, this leads to them being counted as workers and employees when the government announces some kind of relief mechanisms, when they announce schemes, or when they declare a minimum wage for a sector, or when they declare workers' benefits. So, and of course, the recognition, like Rohan was mentioning, also means that they get included in the company's code of conduct, which already has a lot of ethical business practices listed there. And so they get the benefit of that as well. And the second thing is a strong and effective government social protection system to specifically cover home-based workers, which will improve resilience to crisis. So these two stakeholders definitely have a part to play in reducing pre-existing vulnerabilities. And the last one, related to what I was speaking about in the earlier slide, is that support for these producer companies and cooperatives, because they have really been able to provide access to livelihood in these terms of crisis. And support can be in the form of tax exemption on the items produced by them. A lot of them are smaller, in fact, than the MSME sector even. So that support will be helpful. Another one can be special provisions for financial support to them in terms of working capital and easy loans. And the third one, this is for the brands specifically, that preferred sourcing from these home-based worker collectives. The experience of some of the buyers and brands that work with these collectives is that it becomes easy to coordinate on logistics. These collectives have professional teams that do the sampling, costing, and logistics and marketing work. So you're dealing with professionals, but they also have the intent of providing home-based workers' livelihood in mind. And so the work is also being done ethically, and a living wage, or at least a minimum wage, is ensured. So it's good for a variety of stakeholders. Yes, that's all from my end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sonakshi. That was really, really helpful, and I think packed a lot of very pertinent findings, and also points in that are relevant for a number of different stakeholders as we seek to improve conditions for home-based workers and within the informal supply chains. I'd like to now invite Leila Azhar, who is the Executive Director at Homenet Pakistan, to speak. Leila ji, she has a very distinguished career working in this sector, having been ex-member of a number of eminent committees, including the Provincial Commission on the Status of Women, Lahore Division, a member of the World Bank Pakistan Advisory Council on Gender Equality and the Women's Labour Force Participation. She's also an ex-member of the Punjab Pakistan Commission on the Status of Women, and in 2012 was honoured by the International Alliance for Women with the World of Difference Award in recognition of her contribution to informal sector workers. And again in 2016 was also awarded by Oxfam with the Women Economic Empowerment and Leadership Award. Now Leila ji looks after the network in Pakistan, which is a large network across the country, and she joins us from Lahore. And I'd like to invite Leila ji to share, please, some of your experiences of working with home-based workers in Pakistan, and any recommendations that you would have for improving supply chain transparency and working conditions for home workers in Pakistan. And if time, because we've got about 7 or 8 minutes, could you also share some of the achievements in Pakistan to achieve greater policy recognition? Because that's an interesting developments in Pakistan that might be of interest to the wider audience here as well. Over to you, Leila ji.
Thank you so much, Rohan, for giving me this opportunity to share the part from Pakistan. It's really a great honor, and it's always a pleasure to be part of such regional meetings where we can share what Pakistan is going through and what is the future with regard to the home-based workers. As you said that I should, you want me to share my experiences with regard to home workers. It's a long story. It's been like more than 18 years now that the whole work of home workers started in Pakistan. So, and that was the reason why Homenet Pakistan was established. And it started working as an informal network in 2000 after the Kathmandu Declaration, when Homenet South Asia was established, and later on country Homenets were established. And Homenet got registered in 2005, and since then it's a wholly solely work and objective and mission and vision of the organization with regard to the empowerment of the home workers and the empowerment of the women in the informal economy. So that's a long journey. Then I just want to share the main highlights of the Pakistan. Since the topic today is on the garment industry, just want to give a brief overview of what the Pakistan garment industry is at the moment. It's about like, it is one of the biggest export-oriented zone in Pakistan, the garment and textile industry, and it has the GDP contribution of 8.5%, and the garment export internationally is 63% to 68%, and it makes up for like 54% of the export avenues. And the percentage of the world market for garment and textile in Pakistan is, it makes up to 1.81% of the world textile market. And astonishingly, the minimum wage within this sector as calculated is $82 or 64 euros, that is 7,000 Pakistani rupees. So about 38% of the manufacturing labor force works in the garment industry, and about 20% in the textile industries. And there are about 5,000 plus production units in Pakistan. So this is all the facts about the garment and textile industry. Unfortunately, on the other side, there is a huge number of informal workers working in the garment and textile industry. Pakistan has, I think it's second largest informal economy, it's 74%, and the major portion is being covered by the home workers. And within the home workers who are part of the garment and textile industry, it's about, I must say, it's like 65% of that informal economy that women are working in this garment and textile. Unfortunately, they are not recognized as workers, and they are not part of any of the commitments of the government with regard to whatever is being exported. So the whole challenge was for us was to identify, map out these women and to organize them and to support them to come up to a level where they can be self-sustainable, and then they can reach out to a level where they can earn their own decent livelihood. So we started with like mapping of the home workers almost in all sectors, but the most prominent sector has always been the garment and textile industry. So by bringing those women into membership-based organizations as a local level, the whole theory of like political economy and feminization framework was, and human rights perspective was like our core background notes, where we organized these women, and these women gradually came up to a level where they started forming their own unions, their own groups, their own cooperatives, vis-a-vis as depending upon what whether they were piece rate workers or whether they were own account workers or micro level business women who were doing their businesses at a very small and local level. So this is basically for the empowerment the whole context of HomeNet Pakistan has been for the empowerment of home workers. So over the years, we have experimented, we have piloted several things for bringing these women into the mainstream. One of the core objective of the organization has always been the advocacy and lobbying for the home-based workers policies. And we have seen over the years that the government of Pakistan has recognized this core issue, and they have gradually bringing this issue in their mainstream agenda of development agenda. And we have seen that the provinces are coming up with the home-based workers policy, laws have been enacted, and other provinces are following those footsteps. Sindh has an approved enacted law. Now the registration of the home-based workers has started. Punjab bill is also going through, ICT bill, federal level bill is going. Then very recently, Balochistan bill is coming up. So these are all the initiatives that were supported by HomeNet Pakistan and its allied organization, where we have brought the government to accept the presence of the home workers in Pakistan and the contribution, recognize their contribution. Having said that, there are a few other achievements that I would like to mention here is that in the context of economic empowerment of home workers, we have been very successfully able to convince the government to have to include the home workers in a very high level platforms. For example, the Women Economic Empowerment Councils established in the province of Sindh and established in the province of Balochistan. And the council was working in Punjab also, but it is redundant these days, where they have included the agenda of the home-based workers as one of an important issue, and trying to bring in these micro-level women into the small micro-level businesses, and the whole process of overviewing or reviewing the SME policies is going on. So this is something that eventually will pay off the home-based workers in coming years. So this is based with regard to their livelihood. Also, when we talk about giving them voice and visibility, there are hundreds of membership-based organizations throughout Pakistan where HomeNet Pakistan have supported them through our members or directly. We have brought them into a level where they are working in groups, small groups, 12, 15, 20, and they gradually taking up their own issues. And we have developed a series of training or capacity development of these workers, and developing the leadership, bringing in the occupational safety and health modules, bringing in digital literacy, bringing in livelihood skills related techniques, bringing the local government aspect, which is directly concerned with the livelihood of the home-based workers. So this is basically, it's an uncounted work that have been done over the years, and this is supporting the home-based workers to a level where they are now taking up their own issues at the community level. So with regard to the suggestions, as you said, there is still a very long way to go. As I said that we have been successful including the home-based workers agenda in the major policy reforms, in the major development agendas, in the sustainable development agendas, and upcoming framework that the government is working on. It's still a long way to go. I see it like another challenge, another step, another ladder to climb when we talk about registering the home-based workers. So this is going to be a next coming up decade where we will be able to support them to get themselves registered to a level where they are counted as a labor force. They are counted in the workers' labor force. So that is still yet to see. But coming to the recommendations, I would like to say that since this the whole context, as I said, they are involved in the garment and textile, they are present in the supply chain, they are present in the value chain. But it's very unfortunate that we do not have any empirical evidence with regard to bring these women to a level where we can advocate for their rights. Now there are things, as you are already aware, and you mentioned that there are things coming up under the Home Workers Hidden Project, where this mapping of the supply chain is going to be, we are taking this up in Pakistan, and it's going to be a first ever supply chain mapping of the home workers, which would eventually lead to a a point where we can think through more policies and more frameworks for bringing these home workers in the supply chain as a dignified and well-respected worker. So coming to the suggestions again, I think in the context of Pakistan or the context of South Asia also, it's very important to recognize at the government level and adopt ILO recommendation 205, which was approved and adopted in 2015. And that is with regard to the definition of the informality. So that will basically, always whenever I'm asked to give in my suggestion, my first point is that this is important recommendation that all the governments should adopt, and they should reframe their frameworks and implementation agendas for the workers. And it's important, yes, we should work towards the ratification of ILO 177, and if it's not the ratification that the government is supporting, we should adopt an alternative mode for coming up with the policies and laws for home-based workers, as what happened in Pakistan. So again, it is very important that the UN-led human rights business framework, this is a relatively new thing that has come up, and all the countries have adopted, countries have signed it, and they are reviewing their laws with regard to this. This is something that would again will be a binary on all the important industries and factories who are supplying to the international market. And in that UN-led business framework, it's important to include the home workers who are part of the garment and textile industry. So another important role is of private sector. So we have had several experiences here where we collaborated with private sector, and it has come out very well with regard to the home workers, providing them minimum wage up to the level of the living wage. So and regular livelihood. So there's a need to see and review their CSR policies and to include the agenda of like bringing the home workers into their ambit and supporting them under the CSR. Then it's important to have like social audits and due diligence of the industries who are supplying it at the international, who are supplying internationally, so we can see and identify where the problem is, because we all know that the factories or industries, they are subcontracting the work, but the layers of that subcontracting is not it's not acceptable by the factory owners or the employers themselves. So we have to highlight and identify those layers where they subcontract, and that subcontracted person further sublet the work to the women and to the communities where these women are working, and we have evidences of that. So and it's also very important that the home-based workers should organize themselves. All the civil society organizations, all the trade unions should focus on organizing and building on their capacities so that they come up to a level where they can collectively bargain for themselves. They can come up for and talk about their own social protection rights, their own minimum wages, and inclusion in the other workers-led benefits. So these were some of my suggestions that I wanted to give here. And one just last point, that over the years, I think, as I said earlier, that inclusion with the working with the private sector, it's important to bring those women groups who are working in a cooperative mode with their own CSR program. So that's from my side. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Leila-ji. That was really fascinating. And I think from the feedback in the chat and the Q&A and so on, I can tell how interested others were as well to hear about the Pakistan context. And I'm sure you'd be happy to take questions, even if we run out of time today, later on in terms of some of the work that you and others have been doing in Pakistan. So thank you very much for that. I'd like now to welcome Mr. Venkat Reddy. Venkat is the national convener of the MV Foundation, which is an India-based organization dedicated to the abolition of child labor and the mainstreaming of formal schooling for children. Under Venkat's leadership, the foundation's reach has expanded to 10,000 villages, resulting in more than 1 million Indian children being withdrawn from work and enrolled into school. He is a board member and advisor to several government and non-government agencies at the state and the central level in India, and has also represented NGOs from India in the UN Special Session on Children. He's also engaged with a number of partners in other parts of the world, from Africa, from Central America, on the concept of the creation of child labor-free zones, which I'm sure will be familiar to a number of the participants here today. Venkat will reflect on the experiences that he and others have had of a very interesting collaborative multi-stakeholder intervention to address child labor in the informal leather sector in Agra. So please, Venkat, over to you.
Thank you very much, Rohan. I am very glad to be part of this panel. And also I heard from Pakistan, what a positive story and energizing, and also other panel members. MB Foundation, just to tell you, as Rohan introduced, last more than 2.5 decades, we're working in the communities and with the government to demonstrate, to eliminate child labor in the different geographical areas, in collaboration and in support with the Stop Child Labor campaign in Netherlands, which is based in Netherlands, and Arisa, he was FLA. And also we worked in a lot of countries other than India. That was the experience working with the brands and companies. It was not the case. Initially, we were only working with the government and with the communities. But over the period, we also learned how to work with them, and that's how I worked. I will share my this is just to give you a background. Yeah, is it okay? Yeah. Yeah, coming back to the specific project which Rohan mentioned and which I was supposed to share with you all is in Agra, in the shoe industry, how the children and child labor is engaged. There was a series of studies, and in those studies, FLA, SOMO, SCL, and MVF were involved. In that, we were not really found the connections with the brand, specific brand, and where the home workers are working. And we also found a high prevalence of child labor along with adults as home workers in Agra. In other places also, but I am focusing in Agra majorly. Majority of the schools, again, where there is high level of child labor, there will not be schools. Because there are no schools, child labor is available for cheap labor, I think. So that was our findings. And based on these findings, all of us put together our minds and said the area-based approach in creating child labor-free zones, and also a supply chain approach with the brands has recommended. Next, how do we next? These are the partners, just to give you an idea. So these are the technical partners we all together. He was MBF, Stop Child Labor campaign, and Fair Labor. And this is the interesting thing where the 4 partners came forward after the study: Strumuller, Bata, Dishman, Elgato. And we have a implementing partner in implementing the project in Agra. This is UPGSS, Uttar Pradesh Gramin. I'll just inform you that this is an NGO. So the area-based approach, basically an area which consists with an administrative unit. That is the unit which we identified, and that is where Agra also we had identified a Shanti Nagar in a ward called 19. And addressing children engaged in all forms of work and children who are in school, out of school, and not just focuses on just out of school or child labor. And to establish a social norm in the given area in support of children. There is a social norm, building the social norm with all the players. That is the, just to give you an area-based approach and child labor-free zone. So there's an inception of to identifying the NGO, orienting this UPGSS, Uttar Pradesh Gramin Shramik Shiksha Sansthan, that is the NGO, local NGO, who are familiar with trade union background and they are well versed with the communities. There's a program launched for these children, Muskan. Project name, we have put it, Muskan is a smiling faces of the children, Muskan. All the Brit centers also we called it Muskan. And before that, there were a lot of exposure visits of this community, from this community, staff, NGOs to other success stories, areas where in Rajasthan and in Telangana. This is just to give you an overview of all children in school, how this work. Community mobilization is MBF's strong point, where we trained our UPGSS members, and we do a survey in that area, tracking every child, door-to-door survey, and then establishing, in that survey we found 1270 children in that area total, and out of that nearly half of them were either not going to school or irregular and working. Nearly 307 children were working in Agra, in that small Shanti Nagar area. And so this is a Muskan is a center where we mobilized community. In the community, mobilization was very important, door to door, convincing parents. At the same time, the advantage of this project is home workers and engaging with companies. They were not known anything about what is happening at the home-based workers, or there's a very lot of gap between their suppliers and mediators and actual home workers. So we engaged with them constantly. I will come back to that, how they have changed their perception about the program itself. And we need to campaign because we have to work with the government. We have to tell the government that to establish schools, to establish bridge courses in that area, and to engage with the government is also one more. And in this process, these companies also are with us, or working with us in favor of children. It's interesting that there was no information about this working areas, working places, how it is going to, how many children are working there, how the workers are there, how their supplies are coming. There's a lot of a lot of gaps in their supply chain. So with this all acts put together, there was a social norm established in that area where it took us 2 years. You know, it's not a simple thing where we worked. It's not a jadugar. It's a tough tasks. Initially, it was mistrust and trust deficit was there within the. Even though as organizations like us, we do not have skills to engage with the companies. You know, we need to develop our own skills to engage with companies. That was also a big challenge. And companies, brands also working with us to establish that trust was little difficult in the initial stages. once that trust deficit was established, we were able to work together in that area. So this is how this supply chain mechanism worked. I was informing you that these international footwear brands, they volunteered actually. We shared the project reports, research reports to so many brands, but 4 of them came forward, where I mentioned initial stage. And we formed a core committee along with the brands to check, to review the process, what is happening, how is happening in that area with the home workers. And interaction. Actually, this gave us, the review meetings gave the brands and the workers interact with each other in those review meetings, just not discussing children, also their issues. And some of them addressing grievances in these meetings, in their supply chain, in the piece rate work, how they are getting less piece rate work. Then the companies were responding with their mediators and agents. And also they found out that they want to establish to look after these social compliances. They have established units in their companies, and also the owner, actually initially they started with as a donors, but they transformed their role as a partners to establish a child labor free zone and their own setup. So how they were sharing their experience with other brands, other companies, and they were organizing exposure visits to visit the Agra, this child labor free zone, Muskan project, Muskan centers. Other brands also, not formally they were not in the project, but they were associating with us, assisting the project. Also to inform the larger public, they were displaying no child labor boards and in their factories. And other shoe, as I told you, other manufacturers started taking interest, and also we conducted the details, who is bringing their, who are the mediators, who are supplying this material. It's a stitching. It's a lot of lot of laborious work. Children and families, they work like in the part of their every day-to-day activity. So in these multi-stakeholder workshops, we were sharing how it is, and then they were organizing their own mediators, their own middle-level suppliers, and telling them that check the child labor issue properly, and also piece rate. They got the feedback from the field meetings, and then they were discussing with the mediators. So we this is a very success story, which we call it as a demonstrated, very demonstrated that elimination of child labor is possible with all players, including the brands and companies. So that is another thing. But we are facing a lot of challenges where once the children are ready, there are no schools. There is no public school. There are private schools, but private schools are free charging fees. There's no public schools. So we are lobbying with that. And private schools are existing there in that area. There are highly fee charged private schools. We have to negotiate with these private schools to reduce fees for these children. And difficult to assess particular brands and particular home workers. That was a big challenge till now. And on account of COVID-19, adults remained unemployed, and demand for cheap labor gone up. And also production sites also, they are producing only 50% of their production. And in this COVID thing, all these efforts, sustaining was very, now it's a big challenge. Schools are shut down and children are with their parents, and they are working now again. But the production is only a half. So they are working in other places, other works, other informal sector. But still, we are hopeful that we will be get back, and we'll get back, and we'll sustain this. And these are the children which I was telling you, they were working before Muskan. Now they are Muskan. Muskan is laughing, and they are now negotiating with, they went to president of the country to represent that they don't have school, and now the government has allotted a school there. And whenever brands and companies coming here, seeing these children transforming child laborers in front of us into a studentship was a great success. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Venkat. That's a really interesting case study for a number of reasons, including for its multi-dimensionality, I think, and the way in which a really holistic approach was taken, and a kind of reminder to those of us that as we're working on labor rights issues, we also need to think about some of the other pull factors and push factors, indeed, within the schooling system, for example, which we can begin to realize as long as we take a sufficiently kind of holistic approach and understand these issues in their totality. So thank you very much indeed for that. I'd like to introduce now, first of all, Mrs. Shakuntala from Tirupur. Shakuntala is a garment home worker who works on checking and trimming of garments. She's been working as a home worker for 2 years, and is also a member of Anukatham, which is a union that SAVE, our partner in Tirupur, is establishing. And with her, alongside her from Tirupur, is Biakula Mary, who is the Executive Director at SAVE Tirupur. And Mary has been working on child rights and women's rights issues for many years, and we'll talk a little bit about the approach that SAVE has taken to strengthen the situation for women home workers. And what I'll do just to start with is ask some questions to Shakuntala, and then Mary will translate and then share some additional perspectives. So first of all, Shakuntala, I just would like you to describe for us some of your work at present, and additionally, if you can also say what it's like to be part of the Anukatham collective, and what support it provides you.
வணக்கம், என் பேர் சகுந்தலாங்க. நான் 2 வருஷம் பிசிறி வெட்டிட்டு இருக்கிறேன். கொரோனா காலத்துல ரொம்ப இதாக தான் இருக்குங்க, வேலை கம்மியாக தான் இருக்குங்க. ஒரு ரூபா கொடுத்துருந்தது 70 காசு 80 காசு இப்படித்தான் தர்றாங்க, வேலையே இல்லைங்க சரியா. அனுதாபம் அமைப்பிலிருந்து கொரோனா காலத்துல வந்து எங்களுக்குங்க பொருள் எல்லாம் கொடுத்தாங்கங்க, அரிசி பருப்பு அத்தியாவசிய பொருட்கள் எல்லாம் மாஸ்க் சோப்பு இதெல்லாம் கொடுத்தாங்கங்க. நலவாரியத்துக்கெல்லாம் இதில் இணைச்சிருக்கிறேங்க அனுதாபம் அமைப்பில் இருந்து. அரசாங்கம் வந்து பாலியல் துன்புறுத்தல் தொழிற்சாலை உள்புகார் கமிட்டி, இதன் விளைவாக ஆண்டறிக்கை 2 வெளிமாவட்ட மாநிலம் ரேஷன் கார்டு பொருள் 3 வெளிமாநில தொழிலாளர்கள் வழிப்பதிவு வலைத்தளம்.
இப்போ உங்களுக்கு வேலை இருக்கா இல்லையா?
வேலையெல்லாம் ரொம்ப டல்லா தான் இருக்குங்க. என்னங்க வேலையெல்லாம் ரொம்ப டல்லா தான் இருக்குங்க, வேலையே இல்லைங்க, பிசிறு வெட்டிட்டு தான் இருக்குங்க.
வேலையெல்லாம் எல்லாருக்கும் எத்தனை நாளைக்கு பிசிறு வெட்டுறீங்க சகுந்தலா?
வாரத்துல 2 நாள் 3 நாள் தான் வருதுங்க
இப்போ வரைக்கும். இப்போ இந்த கோவிட் வராதுக்கு முன்னாடி எப்படி இருந்தது வேலை?
அது கொஞ்சம் நல்லா இருந்ததுங்க. இந்த கொரோனா டயத்துல இருந்து ரொம்ப டல்லா தான் இருக்குங்க. வாரத்துல 2 நாள் 2 நாள் தாங்க வீட்டுல தான் இருக்குங்க.
ஓகே, குட், தேங்க் யூ. ஐ மீன் இவங்க ஷீஸ் சகுந்தலா.
சொல்லுங்க
அம்மா, நீங்க பேசினதை நான் எல்லாருக்கும் சொல்லிடுறேன், ஆங்கிலத்துல சொல்லிடுறேன். ஓகே. She's Shakuntala. She's working last 2 years trimming work in the garment t-shirts, which is coming down to the home-based workers to do that. She's part of Anukatham. Anukatham is unorganized and home-based workers union. It is under the process of registration, which is established by SAVE. And during the pandemic time, they are receiving all the food materials since they were out of cash and all these difficulties, which is explained by many of the panelists already. And also the Anukatham has done during this period to do the relief materials to the home-based workers, those who are being from the outside of the district and as well to the outside of the states. They have given petitions to the government along with the SAVE, but it was reacted, and also the benefits had gone down to the other district and another state as well. And also the registration of the trade union, registration of the interstate migrants was a very difficult and challenges during the COVID-19 situations to provide the relief materials. For that also, SAVE and Anukatham have given petitions to the government to do the proper enrollment. For that reactions, we could see now the government has been established the separate website to enroll all the workers, but it is now at present it is only meant for the factories. They only can open and their own workers can be enrolled into it. But again, there is a challenge now. There are under contractors. The contractors are unregistered. That this kind of system is existing very much in Tirupur. It goes around 75 to 80% of these things. So for that also, again, the Anukatham and SAVE has made a petition to them that this has to be, the website has to be open for all the interstate migrant workers, so that the recording will give us some kind of numbers, how many people are working, so that the effective measures can be extended to them. Short briefly, she has told, then with the background I have explained to that. If any questions related to her, please ask. Continuation of this, I'm Vyagala Mary from SAVE. Already Rohan has been explained about me and the organizations. We are working several years for home-based workers related to child labor and related to COVID-19 situation. During the COVID-19 situations, as you all aware of it, none of the workers get an unemployment. This employment is being very much affected the home-based workers. Still, the factories are not getting orders, complete orders or full orders. So when it is little bit of overflowing, then it comes down to the home-based workers. As she also, Shakuntala is also mentioned that she is getting a now work for 2 to 3 days. This is the exact situations at present. Whatever 2 to 3 days they are getting, the payment will not be sufficient for them to lead the normal life of the family. This is another critical situations for the home-based workers. Now, after, during the COVID-19 also, some of the people, government workers, changed their profession to differently. For example, for selling the vegetables or something like this. This kind of alternative employment also, they have looked for it. But still it was not able to get it for the entire workforces. For example, so far 37,000 home-based workers are being under as the members with us. Out of 37, there are 5,000 are men. The remaining are women. So this, what is the current the difficulties for them? Now, for their livelihood, it is a difficult situations for them. The social security system is completely out of their purview. In these circumstances, they have to be ensured with these two things. One is the minimum wage is not being fixed for home-based workers. These home-based workers are not recognized by the government either, or by the factories, or by the brands, though the brands are coming down to the home-based workers. The brands comes always like a flying. Flying means it will come down for 2 to 3 days and then it will be disappear. So it will not be permanently will be done, but most of the brands are coming down to the home-based workers. So now the government is also not recognizing. When they are recognizing what we meant here, the government have to recognize that these many workers are working under the home-based situations. Through recognizing these people have to be included, or their work schedule have to be included in the schedule of the Manual Workers Welfare Board. The Manual Workers Welfare Board is giving some kind of education loan and pensions. So not alone, education benefits for the children, this kind of benefits are going on. And even during the COVID-19 situation, there are 2,000 rupees is being paid. So these kind of government benefits are not able to get from the government by these workers. So first, we need a recognition from the government to include these workers into the government, in where the SAVE and Anukatham is, along with other trade unions, national and state level trade unions, we are put forthing to the government to recognize them. Second, the lot of middlemans are there from the factory to home-based workers. It has to be reduced so that the women, those who are working in the garment industry, so home-based workers can get benefits directly. Third, the same work, the trimming and checking work is being done in the garment industry is being paid one wage. And then when it is coming here, it is coming down around 50 to 40% of the amount is being cut for them. So this is, in this situations have to be improved. Third,
thank you.
Still the brand is not recognizing that their product is coming down to the home-based workers. If they are finding any workers or their product is coming down to the home-based work, immediately they are treating the supplier badly or asking them to stop. In such a situation, the brand is not having a policy. There are opportunity that it can go down to this. So brand have to have a policy so that they can encourage, tell the suppliers to have a guidelines properly to handle these kind of situations. Amongst all these things, and when they are planning, the social security scheme is highly, since we are working for the garment workers also, it is not been highly respected in the factory itself. So it has to come down with all the entire supply chain. So finally, I would like to put that, when we are coming to related to child labor, related to home-based workers, when they are being part of Anukatham, it is I mean, one of the mandatory rules that they should not involve any children in their home-based workers. I mean, the Anukatham will take care of them. So, the related to Mr. Venkat explained, already we have experimented 7 wards, I mean, 7 municipal wards, we have declared as a child labor free zone. But now the situation, again, we have to start from the beginning. This is what at present situations. Since the school is not opened, most of the children are entered into all the, irrespective of all the garment industry, spinning mills, home-based work. I mean, home-based workers, at least hardly they are getting it 2 to 3 days in all the small and medium enterprises. Now, again, we have to start from the scratch. So, the brands, those who are participating in this, also have to have a concern about this. What I mean, they have to have already the due diligence guidelines and everything. According to their policy, they have to strictly penetrate in the supply chain to how to handle it, how to tackle this one. So this is a crucial time that a lot of children are engaged in where we have to all coming together. We all have to find out the strategy to come out of the situations, and also include in your policy the home-based workers, and then prepare a proper plan to implement, include them, inclusive nature of policy would be helpful for them. With this, I conclude. If you have any questions, or if anything, if I forget, please let me know. I'm happy to share with you all.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mary. I'm sure everyone will find that was a very, very rich set of perspectives that you've just shared there. And as Mary said, in terms of questions, please do feel free to add any questions that you have into the chat. And I think there have been some discussions already, and we will do our best to respond. We are slightly running short on time. We've got around 8 minutes left of the schedule, but I would like to just invite Mrs. Shakuntala just to, again, just add a little bit more of, it'd be very valuable to hear your perspective, Shakuntala. I think really in terms of aspirations, going forward. So looking at your work in the garment sector and the nature of work that you have been doing, what would you hope in terms of what the future would look like in terms of your working conditions, your working arrangements, anything else in terms of your work? Would you be able to share that with us? That would be great.
Yes. Yes, Samandala பேசலாம்.
Yes, so if you could just translate for her, Mary, in case needed. Thank you.
There is a translator simultaneously with her to translate.
எங்களுக்கு குறைஞ்சபட்ச கூலிங்க எங்களுக்கும் கவர்மெண்ட் தொடர்பு வேணுங்க. முதலாளிகளுக்கும் நேரடி தொடர்பு வேணும்.
சகுந்தலா, உங்களோடது மியூட் பண்ணிட்டு பேசிட்டீங்க, கொஞ்சம் அந்த மியூட்டை எடுத்துட்டு பேசுங்க.
எங்களுக்கும் கம்பெனி முதலாளிகளுக்கும் நேரடி தொடர்பு வேணுங்க.
Okay. Okay. She is telling demanding two things. One is there should be a direct connections from the factory and for her, I mean home-based workers. Second thing, government have to recognize them and fix the minimum wage. These two she is putting.
Thank you very much, Shakuntala, and thank you for joining us, and thank you, Mary, again. At this point, I would just like to once again thank the panelists for their valuable contributions, and just invite Subhadra to field any of the questions that we were not able to answer to the panelists, and then we'll move to just summing up and wrapping up the session.
Thank you, Rohan, and thank you all the panelists. I think everybody's presentation was very enriching, and it was wonderful to hear all of you. Thank you so much, panelists. I think most of the questions have been answered on the chat box, but one very strategic question that came from one of the participants is for Venkat. Venkat, one question that came was, what strategy worked for reducing the trust deficit with brands and bringing them on board in the project? So while working in this project, how you mentioned in your presentation about how it took some time, but the trust was built quite strong and it was a collaborative approach. So what were those strategies, couple of strategies, if you could mention, that helped in building that trust?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And also, I also enjoyed the presentations. One is not to sensationalizing the issue. That is one core issue from our side we learned. And two, demonstrating the power of the building consensus. That is second point. That comes from our baggage of our work with other brands also. But that these two things are very important where to build trust. And third thing is there is no design. We won't think that there is a design to exploit a child laborer. So there is we think that in the process there's a very complicity of the government, labor department, and other players are also responsible for this. So the issue of there is no design, then on child labor issue I can talk. I don't know of adult issues, but on children and child labor, if we go with this baggage with to engage with the companies, engage with the brands, initially it was very difficult to understand these three processes. And once you engage with them and then talking to them the model, then they will be part of this slowly. It is a very slow process, not to, there's nothing rushing in this whole thing. But one child laborer, one Muskan center, if I say, on November 14th, we had a group of children coming in a uniforms. The other day they were working at homes. So the small spark in the demonstration, this is possible. Initially, they were also thinking that, even brands thinking that, how are we responsible? Are we responsible for this? We are not responsible. So that's where comes from that ideology and mindset. But once they see the vibration in the community, once they see the transformation, it's a one child itself. Then there is a mood creation in that area where not to sensationalization again. Even though we have published a lot of reports, FLA, MVF, and we have not took into public domain in India, at least in that area, at least. Then we were discussing with them the issue. That was the major thing. But there is a possibility, but it takes time. That's
right. Thank you so much, Venkat. I think those were very important insights. I think non-sensationalization and also a dialogue. I think an open dialogue and discussion, I think have been pretty helpful. I think, and I still remember I was a part of this project, and we had so many discussions and so many meetings and stakeholder engagement, and and it was very encouraging to see the brands participating also in all this, in some of the visits in the community and in the slums, and I think that visualization was also very, very significant. I think Rohan, I know we are running short on we definitely have less time, and we are almost like hitting the end of the webinar, but it has been very interesting to hear from many participants. I mean, one of the participant also mentioned, which I would like to say here, that can we form a group of brands in India to work with their Indian counterparts to take up issues with the government to ensure social security for the workers, for the home-based workers. I think these are very interesting, issues that's coming up, and I would definitely, revert these kind of issues also to the Hidden Home Workers Initiative, because you guys are definitely are very well placed. And I also want to mention that this is not the end. I think it has started the discussion, and we are going to have a second series. I mean, this is just the first one. The second follow-up webinar would be happening sometime end of January or early February. So we would definitely would like to take these discussions. We need to discuss internally and also take up these discussions in the larger platform in the next webinar. And I again want to thank all the panelists for their enriching insights, and of course, very interesting panelists, I mean, and also very interesting participants, because I see lot of questions and lot of insights also on ratification of the ILO convention that will help in drafting a law for home-based workers. I think these are very significant areas to work, and I'm sure organizations like SAVE, HNSA, Traidcraft, MVF, I mean, everybody together, coming together can actually, we can all work towards this. Rohan, I don't think we have any more questions. We can surely now have Rakesh. Yes, thanks, Rohan.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you. And Rakesh, I will just briefly introduce. Rakesh Supkar is business head at Traidcraft Services India, and has over 2 decades of experience working in the livelihoods sector. Focusing on Asia Pacific, including and South Asia. He has a background also working with fair trade organizations, and has set up a livelihood resource center in Bangalore called Vritti, which you may know about. I would just like to welcome Rakesh to sum up with some closing reflections, and then we will complete today's webinar.
Hi, yes, thank you so much, Rohan, and thank you everyone for the enriching discussion. I think it has been an absolute pleasure to hear all the panelists and listen to their insights. And as we see, I think this remains a very critical problem in a lot of global supply chains, especially in the textile and footwear sector, where the number of these are all labor intensive sector, and in fact, when these sectors function well, they can be a real instrument of empowerment of women, and providing regularity of work, good dignified work to a lot of women from the poor rural communities. But as we have seen, and I think right in the very first presentation, Subhadra had mentioned that for every worker that works in a factory setting in a formal employment scenario, there are many more people who are working in the informal setting in these spaces, and not recognizing them or closing our eyes to this reality is not a solution to that problem. I think it is important for us, as a community of stakeholders involved in this supply chain, to recognize the informal sector workers, the home-based workers who are adding value to our supply chain, and understand their issues and challenges faced by them, and work towards addressing them. That is the only way that we can have more inclusive development and inclusive policies for us. And obviously, these communities have been very, very severely impacted during the COVID-19 crisis and the economic lockdown that followed. I think Sonakshi presented to us the kind of impact that the home-based workers across South Asia have faced during this lockdown situation. And one thing that struck me is that, just like the she mentioned about how the vulnerable or the breakdown of the systems where we did not have proper systems to address the social security needs or create a support system to the informal workers, and the absence of that system actually exacerbated the difficulties that the home workers faced during the lockdown situation. So I think just like the crisis, the COVID disease itself, we all know that it impacts people who have previously existing comorbidities in a far more intensive manner than other healthy individuals that it contracts to. And similarly, I think the economic impact of the COVID crisis has really impacted those who are already vulnerable without a social security net, without a support system. They were far more severely impacted by the economic impact of the lockdown than those of us who have been fortunate to have regular jobs and employment. And that's something to keep in mind as we think about addressing these issues. Uh, I think as we look at the solutions, I think two key voices I heard from all the panelists who presented the ground situation and the ground realities. I think the two key voices I heard was that one, I think there is a need for recognition of the home workers as workers and employees in the supply chain who are adding value. And this is primarily a responsibility for the supply chain actors, right from the branch to the companies to the main suppliers who are supplying. I think there's a need for them to really map their supply chain, understand who are the workers engaged there, and recognize them, and then try to address the issues. I think while the issues and challenges are quite stark, we have seen from the experiences of Homenet Pakistan, of SAVE in Tirupur, or even in a very, very intractable situation like child labor involvement with MB Foundation work in Agra, we see that there is solutions possible. If we all come together and put together our effort, we would be able to improve the working situation. We would be able to make sure that compliant processes can be put in place. Now, the second important voice that I heard was that the governments need to also play an active role. There is a need for an universalization of social security system, inclusive social protection mechanism that the governments and there is a need for all of us in the stakeholder ecosystem to really advocate with the government to bring in inclusive policies. And it was really nice to hear that in Pakistan, such progressive legislations and progressive policies are there in place in many of the provinces. And I think many of the other countries in the South Asia region can learn from those experiences and can implement that. The other thing I think very important is that there is a need to engage with the home workers collectives itself so that the home workers are empowered. They and their representatives are in a much better position to articulate their issues and challenges and also participate in the solution mechanism. So they should not simply be an object of our goodwill, but they should be an active participant, and they should be leading from the front into the solution design. So that's an important part of our engagement, and that's where probably the Hidden Home Workers Program is looking to engage with a lot of home-based workers associations and unions to work in different clusters. And as we work with in partners with brands and companies to address this issue, and then what we heard from Venkat Garu from MB Foundation is that non-sensationalization of the issue and working collaboratively with multiple stakeholders, we can really address a lot of issues rather than just raising the problems. So I think these are all important and key learnings from the discussions that we had, and it's important to keep that in mind as we engage in this space. Now, as I kind of close the discussion for today, I would like to share that just like Subhadra shared, this is just the beginning of our dialogue process. We'll be following this up with another round of webinar, with another round of engagement with all of you, and that will probably be scheduled sometime in late January or early February. And during that webinar, I think we'll be doing a much deeper dive into the challenges within the home working supply chains in South Asia, especially in the context of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, and the recovery phase of from that, and what kind of steps that brands and other actors in the supply chain can really take to improve the transparency for and of the home workers and improve the working conditions for the home workers. Those will be the focus points, and how do we support the home workers to tackle the challenges arising from the pandemic. So and along with that, we can also have a discussion on how the hidden home workers program itself can engage with multiple stakeholders, can engage with brand and company partners, and what kind of services can it offer in terms of undertaking due diligence work for the home workers and improving the working conditions. So we look forward to a continuous engagement process, and we look at this as a very first step, and we look forward to taking this journey with you to improve the situation for home-based workers and informal sector workers across South Asia in apparel and footwear supply chain. So I'll probably close there. I would like to thank everyone, all the panelists, all the people who presented the on-ground work that is being going on, and all the participants who joined, the various representing various brands, companies, and various stakeholders. So thank you so much. It has been a very, very enriching experience. So I'll probably stop there. If any of you would like to close. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Rohan. Thank you, Subhadra. Thank you, Sonakshi.
Thank you.
Rakesh ji. Thank you,
Thank
Laila ji.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you so
Bye,
much.
Mary. Bye, Mary.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.